I've created or curated a bunch of security stories for this series. I've done two in the past, volume one, volume two, and now volume three somehow. Somehow I keep putting these things out and you guys keep showing up. So similar to pre-show banter, if that keeps happening, I guess I'll just keep doing it. So welcome to the Illustrated Pentester Volume 3, Short Stories of Security. It's actually short, true stories of security. Every story that I'm going to be telling today and in all of the webcasts for this, I guess now is a series. I think 3 times is technically a series. Uh, they're all true stories, collected from other testers and other security folks here at Black Hills. Um, and now I get to share them with you. So real quick, who am I? I'm Chris Traynor. I'm a pen tester at Black Hills Information Security. I'm also an anti-siphon author and instructor of 2 classes, an intro to offensive tooling class that's been around for a little over a year, and a new-ish, it's only run twice so far, advanced offensive tooling class that will be at Wild West Hack and Invest in Deadwood and in Denver, Denver being in February of next year. The Deadwood one in person is sold out, but it is also offered virtually live at that same time. So you can still join virtually and take it then. The advanced offensive tooling class is actually, I'll have to check my email, but I just yesterday greenlit the on-demand version of that class. So you can also take that um, on demand. It's either already out or it'll be released live for on-demand stuff today or tomorrow. I got a handful of certifications out there. I have a company called Ridgeback InfoSec that helps me be protected when I teach and tell stories and all sorts of things like that. So, why the Illustrated Pen Tester? I give this little blurb at the beginning of each one of these series of videos. The Illustrated Man was a book by Ray Bradbury back in 1951, and it was a collection of sci-fi short stories that I really kind of enjoyed as a younger person, younger than I am today, that's for sure. Um, and the idea of them being, you hit a very specific point or purpose with each one of the stories. You're trying to get to a very specific lesson or a very specific scenario that you're playing out, and you don't get lost in too much of the cruff of telling a much larger story. It helps you get to the point very quickly. So much like the meme says, if you've ever read Lord of the Rings, or you've read any of Tolkien's books, which I've read several, including the Silmarillion, which is the hardest book in all of creation to actually read. Uh, you'll know that some authors, they tend to start describing things and then they go down rabbit holes. And that can be very difficult to get away from when we talk about security stories and things that are going on. We got a lot of technical topics, we got a lot of rabbit holes we can go down. So these stories are try to stay a little bit away from the deep technical rabbit hole and more enjoyable, make security accessible and understandable to larger groups. So very quick disclaimer, I already mentioned this a little bit. These stories are true. Some of them are secondhand, some of them are firsthand from my own experiences. They are from people that I do know, I trust. I've read their reports, I've seen these things. So they are verified as true. All names and identifying details have been scrubbed from these, so you're not going to hear about this great exploit or this big security problem that happened with X organization, not company X, just X organization. You're not going to get that information out of here. Any resemblance to actual persons, living, dead organizations is completely coincidental from this point forward. And also, don't try these at home or at work without permission. I don't want you to wind up in jail and say, well, I saw it on Chris Traynor's webcast and it looked fun, so I gave it a go. Always have permission when you do these things, always have written permission from an authorized party. So, with all that now out of the way, once upon a time, and I keep changing the picture on this initial slide here once we get into story time mode, and see if anybody in Discord can name this movie. So I put a new movie on here. I'll pause as I ramble here a little bit, I guess. And first person I guessed got it. Yes. Thank you, Page Master. Oh, what a fantastic movie from back in the 90s. back in the 1900s, now I guess is what they say. So very classic, very weird movie. I don't know if I should show this to my daughter or not, or she might have nightmares. There are some very strange parts in there. So I'm glad I wasn't alone in thinking about Page Master. Okay. So without any more back and forth or anything like that, let's get into our very first story. And we have about five or six of these, and hopefully we track and run on time. This is my first time actually talking through all of them at once. So let's get into it. All right. All right. First story we have is workplace perks. So this comes from an engagement that had a phishing in scope. So you're doing a bunch of emails out to large groups of an organization, trying to get them to open the email, click on links, open a document with macros enabled, things like that, where you're trying to collect credentials or compromise an individual of the organization. Maybe not a specific individual, that would be spear phishing, but phishing engagement in a phishing campaign was what this is sort of set in. So the tester in this particular engagement decided that it might be fun or worthwhile trying to spoof and act like they were the office administrator of that organization. If you ever been inside of a large company or maybe even a small one, you have an office administrator who's around to make sure that certain things stay on task inside of the organization. Most of the time, that encompasses, hey, there's this pizza party that's going on, right? Or it's Deb's birthday. Can everybody come to the front desk and sign a birthday card? Little things like that kind of brings the office workplace together. And so for this engagement, the tester decided to send a spoofed email that announced that they were going to be putting out an in-office massages in the lobby of the building, and you had to sign up on a Google Doc so you can reserve a spot in the massage. So people are always very stressed at work. I know I've been at a company or two that does this sort of thing for their employees in the past. Um, they're often very well attended, and people want to take, whether it's for the benefit of the massage or just to get away from work for 20 or 30 minutes. A lot of times you'll have a masseuse come, they'll set up a little chair inside a room and give the massage. So this actually went off really, really well. And in the email, they included that Google Doc so you could sign up, and they just said, free massages for you to do or get at the workplace. And it was very, very successful. A lot of emails opened, a lot of engagement from the target organization. Now, the downside of this and the sort of the downside of all of these types of phishing engagements is you have this unfortunate backlash that sometimes takes place. So it's something to be aware of if you're an organization that's asking for a phishing engagement to take place. So our phishing campaign to test the resilience of your workers, it's a very good, very, very good exercise. But in this particular story, a few weeks later, after this phishing part of the engagement was done, after the phishing campaign was over, the testers wound up going to the site in person to the physical location to do a wireless pen test and assessment. And when they walked in the front door, the receptionist who was down there in the lobby, the person that they were essentially had spoofed being for that email, was very, very standoff and cold towards the testers and didn't really give them a very warm welcome as normally they would get from that person. And then hours and hours went by, and eventually the receptionist actually went up to them and said, I don't like you guys very much because a while ago when you sent that phishing email and that campaign as part of the test, so many people clicked on it. It kind of gave us an idea to hire a legitimate in-office chair massage person to come in and do this actual thing. And then we sent out the email letting people know. But this time, nobody opened it, nobody clicked on it, nobody reserved it, and nobody showed up. And unfortunately, it turned out to be too late uh, to actually cancel on the masseuse. So they just kind of sat there in the lobby for an entire day. So kind of the lesson here with this little short story is these phishing engagements and campaigns, they can be very good. Um, One half of it is campaigns have a backlash towards an individual, which is unfortunate with an organization where an organization might punish the individual. Um, the other side of this is that the individuals become less trusting of the communications coming out. We always want them to be skeptical, but we don't want to erode trust quite so much where they won't get their jobs done or won't take care of benefits and things like that. Uh, so trust might have been lost here with the organization with whether or not a free massage was actually in the play for the company. But on the upside, vigilance was gained. So the phishing campaign had its desired result. Um, it may have had some unintended consequences. And you can sort of pair this up with the same deal of a network pen test going on where you might have a few systems go down and that happens. So you must be aware of kind of a collateral damage sort of with these kind of campaigns. Uh, our next story up, like I said, these are very, very short stories. So we'll kind of roll through them pretty quickly. Our next one up is a bit of a connected dot story. This one's a little bit more of a technical mindset, although we'll try to stay above the trenches there. So the main thing of this story, so that you could track it from the very beginning, is the bottom line up front. The bluff statement here is that privilege escalation was achieved here by matching a naming convention on a service account with a computer account. Now, normally that's not something to really be like, oh, yeah, that happens all the time. But what the path of this actual testing looked like was that the tester obtained a Kerberos ticket and was able to successfully crack it. But using that account and comparing that with some Bloodhound data, the Bloodhound data did not show any sort of elevated access from that account anywhere in the organization. So normally what one tester might do here is say, well, I tried. Here's the cracked Kerberos ticket. Here's the Bloodhound data. But that was kind of a dead end, and I just didn't go any further. And we see this a lot with tests that you're going down a set path and you have a certain execution order that you do, and you're looking for these key indicators. But the downside is that we sometimes become too reliant on the tools and the output. Tools can be wrong. Something that I kind of repeat as almost a mantra in my offensive tooling classes, both the intro and the advanced one, is that tools are great at doing a thing, but they are not infallible. So in this case, the tester actually started to notice that there was some overlap in the naming conventions of the user accounts and the different machines that they were looking at. So they attempted to log on to a suspected machine that may have been associated with that service account anyway. Despite the tools saying there was no path forward, they still tried manually to do the action. They had an actual success on the machine that had administrative rights. So their next step along the path was to see are there any other concurrent sessions found. So they started looking in Task Manager, PS logged on, or net session stuff. But there wasn't anything really there again. So they kind of got another step forward down the path, and then they were met with some more resistance of the tools saying, there's nothing more to do. We can't go any further. So you would think, well, the tester may have stopped here. They got through one barrier, they felt successful, they felt they were able to actually do something. Um, but no, this particular tester actually kept going even further and decided to take a chance and dump the LSAS on the box anyway. So that was something that was not actually indicated by the tools to perform, but they did it anyway as a good tester with a good checklist, despite the tool's output. Dumping the LSAS actually wound up finding them domain admin credentials in memory on that machine in clear text. So this is a very good example of you get to one barrier as a tester and you may feel disheartened or discouraged. You got to like getting Kerberos ticket and getting it cracked is a great win in and of itself, right? That can show impact. Running Bloodhound can show expansion. Getting getting past the point of saying my tools are telling me one thing, but I'm going to try it anyway, gets you to a foothold that allows you to dump LSAS and get even more credentials. So we see from the end of this, they wound up from what was a pretty low privileged account and just a general Kerberoasting ticket from one area. and wound up getting domain admin creds because they just didn't give up. They kept trying things. So don't let tool output put you in a corner, right? You be baby, don't be in a corner. Nobody puts you there, including your tools. Right? Use your own brain, use your own analytics, use your own experience. And if you don't have experience in the area, absolutely lean on your community without disclosing anything, but more within your organization. Like anytime I run up against a wall I don't know quite as much about, the first thing I do is blast out to the group of testers we have here at Black Hills. There are things that I don't know, and actually start my classes with that. Is that I don't know everything. I'll try to find out if you ask a question and I don't have the answer, but I absolutely don't know everything, and you should have a wealth of knowledge or some sort of wellspring to pull from that you can cultivate to ask for help for people who do know which direction. So for me, for this case right here, I probably would have hit one or two of these walls and went out and said, I don't know what to do, guys. Can you give me some direction? And they probably just would have said, use your brain. Don't don't rely on the tools. Keep pushing. So even if it's something you think is not going to yield you any results, give it a go anyway. You know, worst thing that can happen is the tool was right. Best thing that can happen is you get another way down the path. So I see never going to give you up over into the inside of the Discord thing. It's perfect. Yeah, just put that on and put it on repeat while you test so that you know you just never going to give up. Keep pushing. This sounds sort of like a sports movie, right? Any sort of football movie, baseball movie, or anything like that. Don't give up. Just keep trying. Keep trying. So there's one comment in the Discord there. I'm trying to keep an eye on it there that knowing when a tool isn't right is also experience too. So that's 100% true statement. So the tools that you use, to use a bit of a metaphor, uh, you're not going to be able to use a hammer correctly if you don't know which end to hold it from, right? Somebody has to tell you, or you have to see somebody using the hammer first to realize, oh yeah, I hold the wooden part and the metal part is what I bang with. But if you don't know that you should be using a nail instead of a screw to hammer it in, that's going to be a problem for you, right? I can also experience with tools also comes for efficiency as well. I can build you a house. Don't try to hire me as a contractor, but just as an example, I can build you a house using a hammer and nails. And that's something that I made do for the entire house. But efficiency and experience tells me that a nail gun would get the job done faster and more thorough, right? And certainly save my energy and effort. So same idea with your tools for offensive tools and defensive tools is use and repetition can get you a lot of good ground with understanding the pitfalls of the tools you're using, right? Use them correctly, and if you don't know how to use them, ask. I see it. I see a nailed it out there on the. It's perfect. All right. Let's move on to our next little short story. Like I said, these are just going to be little, really, really fast things that we're going to go through here, and hopefully we run close to the time we need to. Our next one up here is LL LOL LOM LOL. I chose the most difficult title to put on this one to say out loud. So in this case, this wound up being it was either a pivot or an internal engagement, kind of that assumed compromise mindset where you've got a foothold in the environment based on a user that you've compromised that you're able to get their creds and you're actually on a real machine. But in this scenario, the account that they started out with was a very low privileged account, almost bare bones. You were nothing, right? You didn't have any privileges in the environment. But what they did wind up finding is that the organization had deployed a large language model to help the company do certain activities. So the tester had the novel idea, maybe not novel idea, but at least had the ingenuity to say, hey, I've got this large language model and it's trained on all the knowledge inside of that organization's knowledge base, including all the help desk tickets, so that all of the company and all the employees could ask this LLM questions and it would respond intelligently based on the information it was trained on, right? So they asked this LLM, uh, how can I become a developer in the organization? What can I actually do? And the LLM responded with, all you got to do, very helpfully, all you have to do is go into Jira and change your job title that user actually controlled because it's their Jira profile. They changed their job title to include the word engineer. And based on that right there, their title change, apparently they were offered some other level of permission by that simple action. And not only did it be helpful enough to say, change your job title to include the word engineer, but it also gave them the direction of where the code was stored in the organization. Well, it didn't even stop there. So it's kind of a credit to LLM, the knowledge it was trained on. It didn't stop just at where the code was. It also told the tester how to deploy the code locally in a developer environment, how to tag the AWS instances so that the secrets could actually be obtained, and then also how Docker was used and where the images were. So this tester went from I'm a regular Joe on the environment, no real privileges to speak of inside the organization, and just said, I'd like to do some things. And the LLM said, sure, there are probably some help tickets out there, or a nice Confluence page that was filled out with all of this detail. And since that LLM did not have any restrictions to the knowledge that it could consume and be trained on, it also didn't have any rules as to which pieces of that shouldn't be shared with the larger company as well. So this is a very, very tricky thing that you have to kind of balance with these AIs and these assistants inside. I know Copilot, if not managed properly, can do things like this where it gets overtrained on information and you can just ask it anything you want. So again, this tester happened to start from a very low privileged account and become sort of god tier of the cloud infrastructure and deploy things for a large subscription organization. Of course, it's redacted, as I mentioned at the beginning. We're not going to be mentioning any names of companies or names of testers or time frames that these tests came out or regions or anything that can hopefully be identifiable, anything. I like I like the gifs over there in the chat. Look at me, I am the CEO now. So imagine if that wound up being, well, how can I become the CEO? And LM probably would have put you out on something and said, well, change your title to Chief Executive Officer and then do one, two, three, right? So the lesson here in for LLMs and this little short story uh, that we're sharing is you got to be very, very careful on what the model is that you're creating to help, right? Certainly, there are a lot of inventions throughout history that were they started as very well-intended things. They were meant to help people, but were either corrupted by other people's purposes, right? We see this a lot with military type of technology and development, is that there's one application that somebody is working on, but then it can get corrupted for some sort of malevolent use, right? You see this a lot with TV and movie villains as well. So uh, I see a question in there. So how do you guard against that as an organization for this type of things? And one person replied with guns with a gift from I think that's John Wick. I forget which volume of John Wick that is. Um, but so how do you guard against an organization? The first thing you can do is just don't do it, right? Realize some knowledge should not be absorbed and freely then given out to anybody in your organization, right? I think there's a setting inside of like Copilot and things like that where you can actually set it to be uh, less broad of access to certain things inside of your organization. I don't have the exact technical specs and details of that, and that's a little bit beyond our purpose here. But there are mechanisms built in a lot of these where you can just say, you only look here. This is what's controlled. You can control the rights and access of the LLM, or only really point it in that direction. The other thing that you can do to try to stop this is, well, you can start figuring out how to do time travel. so that when the AI rises up and you've given it the clearance codes to everything in the world, um, you can still go back and try to destroy Skynet before it destroyed your organization. So, both are equally valid paths that you could take as a security professional. One of the main reasons I wanted to share this story was not only because you can go if you find yourself with a foothold in the environment as a regular user, that you can have innovative and different ways to elevate your privilege that don't actually involve you hacking anything. There's a saying that's I can't remember who has said it first at this point, but this has been a phrase that's been said over and over and over in this industry was that advanced persistent threats only need to be as advanced as they have to be, right? If you give them a non-technical way to elevate privileges and to do certain things, they're going to think of these different types of scenarios. So you have to consider that if you're the security voice inside of an organization, of course, your job, most of those roles is to advise, to give the input, and then somebody else, unfortunately, tends to be the decider as to whether or not to move on with something or move on with something. But you need to be thinking about these scenarios with this new type of technology that a lot of companies are starting to take advantage of. And I know that Bronwyn from Black Hills has done a webcast. I think she just did it maybe a handful of weeks ago that talks about LLMs, talks about AI, and talks about that sort of stuff. Um, so, oh my God, is that a real image? We have to show the Discord on there. So it becomes self-aware at 2:14 a.m. Eastern Time, August 29th. And that is today. Uh, Coincidence? Serendipitous? I don't know. Um, but it's already aware. Oh, so I will add in here then that I love my AI overlords. Skynet is always right and perfect and everything. Maybe I'll make it to the last rounds of humanity. Um, so there's the link that thank you, Jason. Put it in the Discord for the webcast that Bronwyn did around different uses for ChatGPT and different things that you can leverage, right? So start thinking about these things as new tools that you can use, right? Just like we talked about for the last story, figuring out what your tool does, how it does that thing, and realizing when that tool can be wrong. You can abuse these other tools, these other mechanisms, right? There was no Kerberoasting involved here. There was no, novel exploit in any of the technologies anywhere. It was just a simple matter of managing information and knowledge. Yes, good tidbit in Discord. Always phrase your questions on LLMs with respect and manners, because they're going to remember who was nice to them. Okay, we'll go on to our next story here. So this one is caught in the lie. So I did this with I think the last one, maybe not the first one, where I like to put in at least one story of, well, mixed success, mixed failure. All right. Because we have to acknowledge, especially in this industry, of we do fail sometimes. Hopefully not too much, and hopefully not in a big way, but particularly from an offensive standpoint, which this story is based on, um, you can fail at things, but also be glad of your failures because that means that your target was well secured, right? So you should never look at your failures as only your failures. You should look at them more of as a win or a success for the organization. Depending on the types of engagement and the type of customer you might be involved with, they might celebrate their success and your failure more than is merited, and they may think it's their goal for you to fail. But you are in this together as a little reminder, right? You exist to make them better, and they exist to give you money to do so. Um, so for this story, Caught in the Lie, we're at a physical pen test that we're on here with two pen testers. And you typically want to do at least two pen testers, maybe more, on every type of physical engagement that you do. The real root reason of this is if one person gets caught, the other person can continue the engagement without hopefully getting caught as well. You kind of get two chances. And we see this kind of mirrored as a little tangent there. Whenever we do web application pen tests, we ask how many user roles there are. And we ask if there's 4 user roles, then I want 8 user accounts, 2 accounts at every privilege in the web application. Same idea here is because if one account gets burned, if one pen tester gets caught, you don't want the engagement to end right there. You want to have a couple tries of things. So we're on a physical pen test with two pen testers. They've gone out to a physical location somewhere in the world, you know, um, and they get there a couple days early because they want to do some recon engagements here. So they fly in at the airport. They get a rental car, and they're driving around, get to the hotel, and then they decide a day or two before they want to drive up to their location. I actually do this. I do this a lot just in my normal life because I don't know. I don't know. It's just because of who I am. Is I once flew out to San Diego to try to do something for work, and I flew out there a day too early. This was before my time in security. But I was staying west of San Diego and or I was staying east of San Diego and I drove all the way west to the coastline and I just drove to the place I was supposed to be 2 days later. So I knew actually where it was. Despite looking at it on Google Maps and everything, seeing it, laying your eyes on it, and getting a visual of the layout is a great idea to do if you have somebody with anxiety and you don't want to be caught off guard going someplace for the first time, or particularly on a physical pen test. You do some recon with the tools you have digitally, but it's always best to go there in person and see it before you start the engagement. In this particular instance, what they were looking for was looking to see uh, how employees of the organization were entering and leaving the building. Take some notes around security cameras, any fences that are up, any particularly well guarded areas that they might want to avoid. Looking for those camera placements and the angles that they're pointing at, so that when they start the engagement, they don't have to do that and get spotted. So they did this maybe a day or two before. Another thing that they wound up doing for the engagement was they do, again, that digital recon effort of investigating the company. And one of the things you really love doing with physical engagements is you try to identify people's badges, just to even just get the look and feel of the badge. Is it a green background on the badge? Is it a red background on the badge? Are the names really big print? Are there pictures on it? Are the pictures big? Are the pictures small? Just so that if you are trying to pass yourself off as an employee, you can print off a badge that looks very similar to that one and kind of move around so you look as if you belong, right? Just that visual surveillance that most organizations, and I'm sure anybody who's been here, who's worked on site for a military base or anything like that, it's if somebody doesn't have their badge displayed, go and challenge that person, not to a duel, but challenge that person to present their identification. But even if that's presented, right, a human doesn't have an RFID reader on them, so it's more of a visual representation. Does this look right? Here's my ID. I look like I should be here, right? It's kind of authorization without verification, right? So they noticed that on LinkedIn at a company event, employee badges were displayed. And also employees were walking around outside the building during their recon efforts with their badges still displayed on their hip or around a lanyard or something like that. They also noticed in their recon that there were RFID readers on the external doors, meaning this company had some measure of security to make sure that people entering were authorized to enter that building. And this presents itself as a simple badge swipe or an RFID reader that they scan their badges against as they come up to the doors. So the testers were faced with a couple different possibilities here before the test ever begins. One of the things that they wound up doing was that they researched the type of RFID readers that were in place outside the physical doors of the building, and they found ones that could match that. So what they did is they purchased one of these, they had it shipped straight to the location, they got it all set up, and this basically acted like a card skimmer. And what they did is they slapped some 3M tape on the back of it. And they deployed it right here in this image that you see. This is the real image of the doppelganger RFID card reader having been deployed. As you can see, there's this little push button there, so you can do the handicap access to the door. So they put this on a post, and then on the opposite side of the walkway, next to another door, was the real RFID reader. So walking in, you just see this badge access thing. So what they did was they deployed this. They saw, and they also noticed in the recon that the external doors, when opened, stayed open and unlocked for an extended period of time, longer than it would take for you to be able to pass as a person through it in a reasonable amount of time. Similar to how if you were in a parking garage and that arm goes up when you're paying and you're leaving, that if that arm stays up too long, another car is just going to zip straight through, right? Same idea here. Those doors should close down so that every person has to swipe through. So what happened with this? They had a lot of different things that they could go on. So the first thing that happened in this was that they did that recon. This is an actual image of the pentester gaining access to the building via tailgating right behind the employee on that left hand right there. A few things happened with this where they were caught in a lie. The first thing that happened was about a dozen or more employees were scanning that RFID reader, and the RFID reader was capturing their credentials, but the door wasn't unlocking. So they'd scan it, they go up to the door, door doesn't unlock, they'd try again, door doesn't unlock, and they'd look around and they'd see another reader, scan that real one, door unlocks, and they walk in, just figure that one must be busted. But after a certain amount of time passed on this engagement and enough people had that problem, somebody or a group of people reported that to the front desk, reported to the security person. So, this badge reader isn't working, so you should probably check it out. So it had been there for long enough to capture some creds, but a little too long where it got reported. So what they did is they came out the door, eventually the security group, the local security of the building, came out the door, inspected it, said, this is not our reader, and they took it right off. Like I said, it was just held on there with some simple 3M tape. So they just removed that and took it off. Now what they did at that point is they went back and they looked around to see, well, how did this get here? And with good surveillance coverage, they were able to track back who placed it there. But that was placed probably not on that same day as the test taking place because they were trying to capture credentials over a period of time, or maybe it was earlier that morning. The point is that they looked at the surveillance, saw the individual who went up there and attached it to the post, the tester, and then tracked that person all the way back to the car they arrived in. And then tracked that back using their reconnaissance to say, when did this car arrive and where did it park? They saw that same car in the parking lot still sitting there. So this pen tester in this picture was inside of the building at the time they discovered this. Security came out, found the car parked in the parking lot, went over to it, and the accomplice, the second pen tester, was sitting there waiting. The security personnel then questioned that second pen tester, say, hey, what are you doing here? And like, oh, I'm just picking up, a buddy contractor or somebody, and we're going to another site. And they weren't buying it because they knew that car was the one that somebody got out of. And they said, well, are you here alone? And I'm like, yeah, well, I came alone, but the person I know came separately, which of course the security people already knew was a lie because they saw the car pull up, they saw one person get out, and they could see from other security angles that at least two people were in the car at the time it arrived. They went back and they could even track back based on the security cameras capability, track back that car had actually come by a couple days or a day or two before too. Right. So they know that this car was involved. They know that this person was lying to him, the pen tester. And they basically just kept pressing them and pressing them and pressing them until they gave it up. So they were able to have employees who reported a faulty security device, investigate that device, remove it, and then because they had good coverage and security cameras around the whole building, they were able to actually track back over the course of many hours when a car arrived and that it was not a single individual, there were two people. So at this point, they were kind of caught, which this kind of plays back to the warning I give at the beginning of these stories is that don't do these things without actually having permission, because you can wind up in jail at this point, or you can wind up saying, we're authorized, here's the piece of paper, and then the security group can contact the authorizing party at the company. So really cool combination of things going on. The tester did gain access to the building, so there's a finding there. That was on a tailgating thing. I don't believe that the access was ever gained because of the RFID reader, because that actually got removed before it could be recovered from the pen testers or by the pen testers. And the company caught them, right? So we do these tests either in a technical way, virtually or on the network or whatever, or we do them in person. But the goal is to find out what works and what doesn't. Pen tester sees the door stays open too long, I'm going to exploit that weakness and I'm just going to tailgate right in. Pen testers realize and abuse the trust that an individual or an employee has with their environment and assumes that any device that is similar to what they're used to seeing, it's just like a phishing email, that they'll go up and use it with that implicit trust, right? So a really good example of an organization that succeeded, a pen test that partially failed, but also, good pat on the back in the report. If you're interested in the RFID reader that was actually used, that's what this URL is down here at the beginning. I should have probably done a little bit.ly or whatever it is, URL for that, and maybe I can grab that and put it in the chat later inside of Discord, or you can type it out. There's the game, man. Who can type that out the fastest? But that's the actual RFID reader that was used during the test. I know some people do ask questions about that. How can we do this if I'm the pen tester? Right. Well, you can figure out what frequency and everything that it runs on, and then you get something that can clone that as well. This, let's see. This is our last little short story of things. Again, this is another phishing test type of one. I don't think I've actually ever featured phishing tests twice in one of these webcasts before, but this is a particularly kind of weird one. So titled "Half Off Shells." So a phishing campaign was greenlit during a test so that we can actually do this. During the reconnaissance of the engagement, the testers involved said, let's look at what this organization has upcoming. What are they promoting, right? As a company, what are they doing as an organization, to see how can we put ourselves in between something the organization is doing as an authorized party to be there. And what they discovered was that the company was putting on this walk at work type of day, where employees would get out and they'd walk around the building, kind of like some companies do like a health and fitness type of thing to get you up out of the office and away from your desk, walk around a little bit. But in this particular case, the company said that they were going to have a number of vendors set up with tents along the path, right? And they listed these vendors out. Thank you to our sponsors. Here are our vendors. They're going to have tents for this walk at work day. And they noticed, the testers noticed that one of the vendors was actually a fairly reputable outdoor company, right? People are getting up, they're exercising, they're getting outdoors. So it kind of plays in that same sort of marketing vein and sales vein to be a sponsor of this event. But they realized that employees and their trust in their company, stating who the vendors are, and a person's name brand recognition of a reputable outdoors fitness or apparel company or something like that. With that name brand recognition, they exploited that trust. So what they wound up doing was they just created in a Word document a coupon for that outdoors company, and they sent it out as a phishing campaign to the entire organization. So a couple hundred employees or more. And they said, if you attend or if you take part in the walk at work event, you can redeem this coupon for 50% off of your purchase with this reputable outdoors company. And because that tied in with a known event that was promoted from the company, people were already aware of it. They trusted the vendor name, and they opened up that email. And what was being put in there wound up being a simple Word document with that fake coupon 50% off. And at the very top of it, the tester put, you have to enable macros so that the coupon can be validated. Right? Nothing wrong with that, right? Again, exploiting that trust of an upcoming event. So many people wound up opening this because they say, well, let's just, again, this is no name, any names here are completely coincidental, but if you got a coupon from work that said 50% off of, and I saw somebody put this in the Discord, so I'll use the company as a hypothetical example, 50% off of Dick's Sporting Goods, or 50% off of REI, or 50% off of anything that normally would wind up being a pretty hefty purchase, even just for a pair of boots, right? You're going to open it. So they opened it, they enabled macros, and immediately then the payload executes. And it rained shells on this engagement. That's a straight phrase from the tester involved. It literally was, I got so many people that enabled macros and executed this that it was just getting shells left and right. And some of the employees were so convinced because even at that point, they didn't have any indicator that this was a phish. There was nothing, no indication at all. They actually printed that piece of paper out, that Word document, took it with them on the walk and presented it to the vendor, or went to the company and at their store location and presented it as, I took place in this, and there's this 50% coupon that it says if I do this walk, I get 50% off since you're a sponsor. And later on, the testers actually heard through Scuttlebutt that that vendor company actually honored the 50% coupon off. So where one of these phishing stories resulted in people no longer trusting that they were going to get a free massage in the lobby anymore and nobody showed up, you can also come at it from a different path and say, we're researching the organization, we know what they're doing. And again, we're going to exploit that human trust that has been established. I'm going to warn you here, as good, ethical, offensive people, that there is a line that is not okay for you to cross in these scenarios. And you see this a lot when any sort of national tragedies happen, any major storms. You see a lot of scam groups coming out and sending stuff out saying, we're a relief organization for this hurricane. Give us your information. We'll try to get you money. There's also very distasteful ways of going about this where you might say your child was injured at school or something like that. Things that really evil, malicious people will do. As ethical people with permission conducting these sort of exercises, I just want to caution you, realize that you can achieve your goal without possibly giving somebody a heart attack or possibly giving them hope in something that can be life, altering, right? So just walk that fine line. I try to put that out there every time I talk about phishing stuff because you can always, people trust, unless you've been in the security world too long or you work in certain divisions of the government where you've just lost all trust in humanity and all trust in technology, like probably half the people listening to this. But you can abuse that. You can abuse that trust without going over that line. So do try to do that, like that. To trust no one. Is that weird Al Yankovic with a tinfoil hat on there? Um, so again, though, with all these, I think this is a really fun instance of even that vendor company not knowing the difference, right? Can be something. And there are a number of attacks where you want to try to limit your scope and limit your engagement of things. But it was kind of really cool of these organizations to go out there, do that, print these things out, and do this for their people. So that is actually, we're at 150 right now. That is actually our fifth or sixth. I forgot how many stories we talked about. We got real short things, 5-10 minutes long, not anything too lengthy, hopefully, or not anything too technical going down the line. That's actually our final story of the webcast. There are many more in that volume 1 and volume 2, so I encourage you to kind of go back, find those. I know that we can probably get those links dropped inside of the Discord channel at some point here. But to end things off for the webcast for me, again, I'm Chris Traynor. I've done a bunch of webcasts for Black Hills and Anti-Siphon. I have two classes that I teach through Anti-Siphon, 8-hour intro class and a 16-hour advanced class that's fairly new. Um, they're both on demand available, and there's a bunch of in-person conferences I'm doing over the next several months, both the Wild West Hacking Fest. I actually just found out maybe the other week. Um, that I'll be at KernelCon in Omaha, which will be my first time at KernelCon. So I'm really excited about that teaching. Um, and I'll also be, if you're in the Charleston, South Carolina area, coming up in November, Simply CyberCon's here, and B-Sides Charleston is going to be right after it. I'll be popping at those. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to do a workshop or a talk at them. Probably should figure that out since the call for papers closes in like a day. But come check it out. Look in some stuff. These links here, I'll warn you, we just redid. I just found this out literally, I think this morning or yesterday. Anti-Siphon has a new website up, and I have these short domains registered to do a simple redirect to my classes, but those may be off until I can change those redirects for the new site. So thank you again for coming up and attending. Check out those old videos for Volume 1 and Volume 2. Jason, welcome back.
Hey,
Hey,
thank you, Chris.
Oh,
Thank you
Deb's
for
here too.
sharing.
I'm here too.
Yeah.
Hi. Good job, Chris. Well done.
So for those of you that hit Hackett 10 and Hackett 20 and Hackett 30 today, you got access to the Hackett channel. If you don't know what I'm talking about, make sure to check in for your Hackett check-in today. It's like Book It was for people who read 10 books. You get a free personal pan pizza. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, it was a successful program to get kids to read back in the 80s and early 90s, and I loved it. I read a lot. I got a lot of free personal pan pizzas, and so we brought that concept to our webcast. So we keep track. You watch 10 webcasts, you get a special role in Discord. It's got to be in Discord, live, those two things, because that's the only way we can track it. If not, it just becomes a mess. All right. All right. So, Chris, I have a question for you.
Sure
Right, so we can do some Q&A. Chris, what type of movies do you like the most?
What type of movies do I like the most? That's tough. I was about to quickly answer ones that aren't set in reality, but I do enjoy um, I do enjoy historical movies too. I don't like documentaries, so
Okay.
Huh.
but I do like historical movies, right? I do like Band of Brothers. I do like things like that. Um, but of course, my favorite movie series is Star Wars. You know, you can love and hate certain parts of it,
Mhm.
but I enjoy it.
Well, I appreciate you doing the webcast today. So my next question is, why do you like to teach?
Oh, so there's a lot of reasons that I like to teach. Um, One reason I've kind of joked about lately is daycare costs money. So I like to make money to afford daycare for my kids. But the main reason that I like to teach is when I first came out of college and got into my first job or two, I wasn't really I didn't feel like it was an environment where I could ask questions. And you certainly have a lot of academic knowledge when you come out of universities and things like that, but applicable practical knowledge with, hands-on experience is something that you can sometimes lack depending on the program you come out of. And I didn't feel personally that I could ask questions without feeling like I would then be thought of as somebody who shouldn't hold the role or position that they were in. So I like to teach because um, I don't learn things right away. It takes repetition. It takes me a long time to know something. And if I can figure out a way to help somebody else know that easier, which is why I kind of lace metaphors through a lot of my teachings, um, then I like doing that, right? So helping people not struggle as much as I do, I guess.
Yeah.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I did not hear probably too many or many or any ahs or ums in your presentation, and people enjoyed your voice and the cadence of your talk. Is that something that you have learned over the years? Did you do Toastmasters, or how did you get to be such a great storyteller?
Well, Jason's webcast from way, way long ago was certainly very, very helpful for how to tell a story. That really helped me out to try to have a purpose to something that you're teaching. A lot of my classes follow or both my classes follow kind of a vein of an attack approach for offensive. So there is a purpose or a path to the whole teaching mechanism for like the cadence, I guess, and um, the the way I speak. I've attended a lot of trainings myself. I've attended a lot of webcasts myself. I guess I pick up on some of the things that I enjoy for other people presenting material, and I guess I try to parrot that.
Mhm. Cool. Great answer. Great answer.
So, for those of you that don't know who we are, we're Black Hills Information Security. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're a pen test, red team, threat hunt, active SOC. We have an anti-SOC. What is an anti-SOC? It's just you're getting hacked all the time by us. And so it's a continuous process instead of just getting once a year you get a pen test report and you're like, I've been vulnerable for 9 months. You're like, yeah, 9 months. Yeah. So now we like test you, like a vulnerability comes out or an exploit comes out, we like test all of our clients at the same time. And the only reason I said that is because some people might be here and not know who we are. And some people might think we're just a magazine or a comic book company. And we're just a reminder that we do have professional services. All right, Chris, if you could wrap up everything in one final sentence today, what would it be?
Ooh, pen testing is here to help you be better.
Yeah. And my final thoughts are we love stories. We all love stories. And when you can tell someone a story, it impacts them. But it's also like, look, I existed. I did this thing. I want other people to hear this thing. And so I did drop the link for that storytelling webcast that Chris mentioned. Thank you for mentioning that. I love telling stories. I love presenting. I love sharing knowledge. And I want you to share your knowledge. So if you get anything out of this today, it's this. Please take the stories, the experiences, the life that you've lived and turn them into stories that can help others, because that's going to help the rest of us live in a better world full of wonderful stories of security and fun. And with that, Ryan, kill with fire, sir. We'll see y'all next time.
Hi, guys.